He's heard about Dr. Phil, and he agrees with the doctor at Englewood that it would not be healthy to do the show. I think they're both nuts. He's Dr. fucking Phil. He can fix anyone. And they haven't exactly got a clue either, so what have I got to lose? Of course, I'm the crazy one, but sadly, they cannot legally prevent me from leaving the hospital, which would have been in my best interests. And I insist on accepting Phil's call back, which comes about 10 minutes after the old lady throws the tea. It's important you understand how desperate for a cigarette one is after a few days and nights in any American psych ward. It's not like Ireland, where the only good thing is they let you smoke. In America, there's fuck all for you but a nicotine patch, and there's no outdoor area. So after a week, you're losing your mind even more than you already were. And so my insistence on abandoning all reason and going to Dr. Phil was in huge part based on my desire to get outside and smoke, and furthermore smoke some weed, which was also agony to be without at the time. Phil was offering me an 8-hour car ride to a treatment facility he had recommended to some of his guests in America's South. My sneaky addict mind knew that was hours of weed and cigarettes, and yes, sir, it was all the way. I had been introduced to a new lady manager while at the hospital, and we went with the driver and the 2-man film crew Phil had sent to my abandoned apartment to meet the weed man. And then I climbed into the big black van, kissed my manager goodbye, and sailed off into the night, certain that this time I'd be cured. I don't mean of smoking. I mean of being angry and suicidal and too full of pain to function outside of hospital. I had been praying that God would send himself to help me in the form of a human being, and I really thought the one God had sent was Dr. Phil. I thought he was literally the answer to my prayers. But I should have known he was batting for the other team because he wasn't spiritually honest. On Jimmy Fallon's show, he was asked how he and I got together. She contacted me, he said. Not true. If he had told the truth, Jimmy might have accused him of exploiting someone while she was very fragile. So after 8 hours of driving and smoking and talking, we got to this trauma treatment centre in the beautiful ass end of nowhere. The doctors in New Jersey had said, rightly it transpired, that a trauma treatment would be dangerous because it was so vulnerable. But no one had listened. First bullshit is the people at the centre want to take my iPad. They might as well have tried to take my lungs. I ran them round the property in the black of night, then shoved it down my pants and hid in the bushes, while 2 women roamed around the grounds in a golf cart searching for me and it. In the end, I gave in and they got it. And in protest, I wouldn't take any of my possessions into my room. I told them they could keep everything else I had if they were taking my iPad. Because it's cruel to just take a person's crutch and leave them sitting in their shit with no comfort or distraction for 24 hours a day, especially if their shit happens to be a load of trauma. So I went overnight from having some comfort to zero comfort, and I hated the ladies for it. But only for a day, because it transpired they were lovely, both of them. I meet the psychiatrist at the trunk of his car as I'm stomping back from the garden toward my room. He offers me a fig bar. What the fuck does a rocker want a fig bar for? Is he crazier than me? I tell him no thank you, fig bars are for hippies. I can see we ain't going to be getting along at all. It's late by the time all is settled for the night. I get to bed about 1 a.m. Dr. Phil's show people are coming in the morning because the condition upon which Phil helped me was I had to do the show. And I had to do it before I had any treatments at this place where he had referred me. That way, you don't get to complain on camera afterward about how badly you've been exploited and how reckless your so-called medical care seemed at the place he recommends. I mean, I'm not even sure anyone on my treatment team sought my medical records from any hospitals I had been in, including Englewood, from whence he had plucked me. So they didn't seem to know if I should be subjected to even 1 hour a week of individual trauma therapy, never mind 9 hours a day. I felt brutalized, making me even more unwell. So anyway, Now I'm sitting in front of Dr. Phil, ready to shoot the show, full of hopes and dreams. First thing he says is he's here because my fans wrote to him after my Facebook video and asked him to help me. He waves a vast folder he claims is full of their emailed requests, all full of love and support for me. I ask him if I can keep the folder and its contents. He says yes, but forgets to give it to me. He tells me how lucky I am now, because this place I'm in is so opulent, etc. It's got to be the best. He makes me tell him my story on camera. I trust him because I'm vulnerable and I want to live. So I go ahead and let it all hang out. I cry like a baby. He even makes me speak to my mother, the things little Sinead might want to say, which I do, because I think he's helping me. Oh, and also because I'm given the vibe before shooting begins that my being on the show while I'm so fragile is brave and will help others. He goes on about some big producer he knows, swears this guy is going to call me and we're going to make records. When we're filming a final walk around the property, he tells me he was recently at a meeting attended by Steve Bannon, and that the Trump people had actually discussed at that meeting the idea of Make America Great Again being Make America White Again. He acted all disgusted when telling me. But I figured if he really was that disgusted, he'd be telling the world. That would be spiritual honesty. To risk losing all you have to save the vulnerable. To risk being called crazy and being a pariah. No, he didn't have the balls. Off he flew in his chopper and I never saw him again. The following day, me and the psychiatrist had a disagreement. He accused me, falsely, of wanting to be treated like a rock star because I'd forgotten to sign out when I was going for smokes. I was insulted because I would never actually want to be treated differently than anyone else in a treatment facility, and it showed me his fig bars had gone to his brain. I was hurt, but I never said a word. I just quietly left his office and went to my room. Apparently, he assumed I was in a rage, and he went running off up a hill to get away in case I came after him. That just made me angry when I hadn't been angry. The fucking shrink is a fig-eating pussy, and you can't even cry around him or he'll fall to pieces. Jesus Christ. I told him not to put me back in a room with him for fear I'd hit him. So Phil was called, and he duly called me. I told him my concerns about the fig eater and the attentiveness of the rest of the staff. I told him also I didn't think I could be fixed, which I still think. I don't fail, Dr. Phil said, and warned me not to be battering the shrink. Things go from bad to worse each time I make a formal complaint about the facility's crew, or about the other suicidal girl Phil sent them after a show, sobbing to me about not getting the care she felt she needed, although she said she was having urges. I'm eventually put out of the main facility to live on my own, in a vast, empty, rather grand house that was on the grounds. I'm not allowed into the main house, which makes me very angry, as do the 9 hours of trauma therapy every day. One day, in the middle of a marathon trauma therapy session, in walks one of the male staff in charge of legal and accounting. He handed me a contract he wished me to sign, saying if I recorded anything all the clients did as part of their treatment with the music therapist, the recordings would be owned by the treatment centre. Needless to say, I didn't sign, and it's disgusting that anyone would tramp into someone's therapy session for any reason, never mind to let that person know you want to take advantage of her. So, I finally lose my shit one night, shouting my head off all over the place, and cops are called because I've said I'm suicidal. I'm taken to the local hospital where they assess that I'm not actually suicidal, but traumatized. They advise me not to return to the treatment centre, and the cops then very kindly find me a motel and take me there. In the morning, inside my bag, I find the key to the big house I'd stayed alone in at the treatment centre, and stupidly decide to bring it back. I call the only cab driver in town. He tells me he has a bullet in his head from the Korean War and that all the ladies of the town want him. As we drive down the road, I see a beautiful graveyard on our left, white statues and carvings, all giant religious symbols and flowers. On the right side of the road opposite this is what looks like an animal graveyard. Maybe 100 black stones, the size of grapefruits, are in the ground, but there are no discernible graves. The grounds are unkempt, the grass uncut. I ask my driver if it's an animal graveyard. No, he says, that's for the black people, but I don't hang out with them much. I feel my heart rip in two. And now I understand why the one black lady who works at the centre was so astonished that it was her hands I chose to cry into when things got too much. She'd been shocked the first time it happened and thanked me as if it were an honour. I go to give the key back and I get talked into going to LA to another treatment centre, which I agree to, and am flown there and dumped. I hear nothing from Phil, although I've been told he's underwriting my stay. After 3 weeks, one of the staff, in a temper, informs me I'm in fact being put up for nothing by the centre, and that what I'd heard at my first facility wasn't the case. No surprises there. I pack up and leave, and I have never heard from any of them since. I wrote a song about all this in 2018. It's called Milestones, and will be on my next album, although a demo of it is already out on YouTube. And no, it doesn't mention fig bars.